And most of all, I'm very excited about the launch of this WE magazine, Leadership in the Networked World, while the magazine went online this noon. And most of all, thanks to Ulrike and her team who made this issue to happen. And again, thank you also of having drawn us in for partnership and support. And the Bertelsmann Foundation is really honored to be part of this wonderful publication. And at this point also thanks to Adobe Connect who kindly sponsored this event. And for more information about the leadership of the leadership series of the foundation, on the left hand side in the info box you see the website, and I leave it at that. In a short nutshell, for us, besides various studies and master classes and these events, we are most interested really how the evolving web is influencing and shaping our understanding and leadership as such. And I think that's what WE is about, and that's why I'm particularly excited to welcome today Peter Kruse and John Hagel, to whom I express my warmest thanks for joining us today. So maybe Ulrike, you would like to introduce them, and thanks everybody for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Tina, for making this possible. Maybe I'll start out with just a few words about WE Magazine before I introduce John and Peter. We founded WE Magazine actually 2 years ago, and the entire issue we have published so far actually dealing with the fact how our understanding of we has changed since the rise of the internet, since the possibilities that we really can instantly connect, that we can come together in real time if you want to, and really share our expression, thoughts, work, whatever. And this actually will also be my very first question for Peter and John regarding leadership, how their understanding of we in relation to leadership has changed since the rise of the internet. But before they answer, just let me give a short introduction. Peter Kruse, he is based in Bremen. He's running a company which is called Next Practice, and they've developed a tool that can tap into the intuitive beliefs that really drive social change. By accessing the parts other data can't reach, this tool, Next Expertiser, offers you the most valuable insights in data which you actually can get, because it's really telling you what's next. And this is, I guess, a very important thing if you are a leader. John Hagel, he is based in Silicon Valley. We've talked a couple of times about The Power of Pull, his latest book. He's also somebody who's arguing about, Tina just showed the book,
Just had
that leadership will be more centralized in the future. He is a consultant working for Deloitte. He founded together with John Seeley Brown the Institute of the Edge, and this is why we called his article in WE Magazine Leading from the Edge. So I think we really have two great people here, two experts on leadership, and hopefully, we'll have a great discussion. John, let me start with you. A big WE question. How has your understanding of WE changed since the rise on the internet, and what kind of impact you think it will have on leadership?
Well, I think that it's very interesting to ask the question of anybody, what do you mean by we? It's very revealing in terms of their answers as to what frame of reference they have. Many people will say, well, we is my family, or we is my local work group. Some people might say it's the company that they participate in, or their local geographic community. Others will probably talk about their country or their religion, perhaps. I think what's increasingly important, though, is that as a result of the connectivity that we're building on a global scale, the we that's most relevant increasingly becomes the global we. It includes everybody. Everybody is able to connect in ways that were just never possible before, not only more quickly, but more richly, and that creates an opportunity to come together in very different ways than we have in the past. Yet all our institutions were built around much narrower definitions of we. And so I think it creates a huge both challenge and opportunity to rethink our institutions and our leadership styles given this new global we.
Peter, you want to jump in?
Yeah, you have asked what is the change? Is there a change since the net is there? And what I have to say is that there is already the next change. You know, my first expression was a beautiful, you're connected with so many people, everything is easy, you can have these hype effects, you can be strong from the edge. This was my first impression. And then I predicted to the people that these hype effects will be there. Then, you know, if you look now at the hype effects, it's trivial. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows that the power by synchronization of people may be even relevant for politics and for states and for change in the biggest way. But in the moment, you know, and you have already said that I'm interested in what the people have in the unconscious value system they share. And this is what we call culture. And so the question I have when I'm talking about we today is on which level of quality we really like to share. So if we're only using the internet just by combining so different cultures, then it's totally difficult to really create something like a highly qualitative discourse. What we ever can do is to have an upspeeding effect in these nets to disturb something. But you know, when you change from the unstable phase to the next stability again, then the question is, are you really closely connected to the people you create something with? And you know, I'm always searching in companies, and sometimes when they merge, I realize that even when the people are living together for years, they keep the difference by keeping different cultures. And they cannot even reflect on these different cultures. They just realize in everyday doing. And this is what I'm, in the moment, a little bit puzzled about. How can we guarantee that we are not on a too trivial level of we when we start to do it with these really huge global networks where we are connected maybe by the same language, but we use the language from very different cultural backgrounds. And this is anytime the problem of understanding and the problem of meaning. So how can we enhance the quality in these networks when we are not able to detect meaning differences automatically? We have to do it by discourse because the semantic web is not there. We are still on a more statistical level. And therefore I'm totally sure that the web will be very powerful, but the big question is on which level.
And I think that's
John, you were saying. Go ahead, Tina.
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, Peter and also John before, on the one hand, you referred to companies, and then on the other hand, you referred to the more global we. And I think we have a question from one of the guests, Ola, coming in, whether we can compare the experiences regarding leadership in companies with leadership in politics, and whether we can expect a kind of democratization in economy as well.
I don't know whether John would like to answer first. I've just had a bigger part, but...
Well, sure, I'm happy to take a stab at it. I think that in some respects at least, the leadership challenge or opportunity is similar in companies and in politics. I think in an increasingly rapidly changing world, an increasingly connected world, the challenge for leadership, again, whether you're talking about companies or politics, is to help make sense out of the changes that are going on. Help people to see patterns in what initially looks like a completely confusing and random array of events. so that they can start to orient themselves and have a sense of direction and grounding. And then I think the other aspect of leadership is to help people make progress, to help motivate them in ways that can start action that will have impact in this rapidly changing world. And whether, again, we're talking about companies or political institutions, I think both of those become increasingly central to how to have impact in this world. I guess the other thing I would just say is that I think in both cases the shift in one of the many shifts in leadership is moving from what I would call programs, where you have very specific instructions and details in terms of what needs to be done in what sequence, to much more a notion of creating platforms for participation, where people can come together and draw out of each other more of their full potential. And that, again, I think that applies both in a company context as well as in political institutions.
It's just thinking about involving the people, getting their creativity, getting their impulses, their inspiration. I would totally agree. But I think there's a difference between companies and states in the sense that in a company we have this responsibility in the sense of capital, and this is going down in a hierarchy. So you cannot make responsibility diffuse in the network. In a state, you have the basic idea of a democratic state that the people are more or less the ones giving the direction, because in a democracy it's going in this way, in representative form or in the direct form. But in a company, it's very, very hard. When you're the leader in a company, you are taking decisions, and in the end you are responsible for the decisions. And in a company, for example, what's very difficult is to bring up the entrepreneurial idea from the bottom. So what you can do is you can invite the people to be creative. You can invite the people to be part of the idea process, but in the decision process, I'm a little bit puzzled to compare these two systems because it's different. Do you agree, John?
Well, I would actually say that the decision process is converging in interesting ways. I would have said actually the government, at least most governments around the world, tend to be extremely hierarchical and command and control. Democracy is a relatively new innovation and not as broadly held as most of us would probably like. And in companies, I think that the companies that rely on command and control in a world of increasingly rapid change are going to be ultimately rendered obsolete, and the need to come to very different forms of decision making and participation, not just within the company, but increasingly the opportunity for companies is how do you connect into broader networks where command and control actually does not work, where decision making is much more diffuse and much more democratic, if you will, in the sense that everybody decides whether or not to participate in the network. And so I think it's an interesting set of evolution on both sides, and perhaps we'll end up looking more alike than differentiating corporate decision making from government decision making.
You know, what I like always to do is to compare a situation in a company to a social brain. And if you look at the human brain, you have on the one side the cortex, which is a really highly connectivity system, which is very self-organized, producing a lot of patterns in an absolutely fantastic, creative and quick way. But on the other hand, the stability comes in via the limbic system, which is more or less a value system which we have learned through our first 20 years of life. So the brain, which is really a creative system, is also hierarchical. There is something stepping in which is reducing the number of possibilities. So if you look only at the cortex, it's more or less like overwhelming creativity. And then suddenly there is stepping in this value process, saying this pattern is not what I like, and that pattern is what I like out of my own history. So there is a hierarchical part, even in this most creative network we know in the world. And what I think is that when we are talking about leadership, we are all a little bit close to this. that we are reducing the possibilities of what can be by having a vision, for example, a basic idea, an entrepreneurial idea, and then we are limiting this enormous creativity. And when we don't have this effect in a network, then I'm a little bit afraid that this network will start to drift. There will be no stable state at all. The more connectivity you have in the system, the more probable is that the feedback loops already disturb, again, any upcoming stable state. So when we have a real worldwide network, we have to think about the value system to stabilize the network. Otherwise, we get into a schizophrenic phase. It will just drift. And this makes no sense because the drifting system is not really able to survive. So you have on both sides something which is not working. If you're only hierarchical, your total intelligence is limited to the one on the top. And he can be as intelligent as he may be, he will be always limited. And on the other side, you have this enormous network where a lot of people can tune in, but you have a network which is in itself not stabilizing. So you have to think a lot about a stabilizing, reducing of the enormous space of probability. There are a lot of things possible in the system, and we have to discuss the value system, stabilizing this enormous creativity to something which we really would like to have. Otherwise, I think we will not get into really good patterns worth to live with.
There was just a question coming up, Peter. What do you mean if you use the word network?
Yeah, it's just a system where you have high connectivity, where no one is in a way limiting the activities of the others or steering the activities of the others. So what you have is just a system where connectivity gets together with a lot of feedback loops, so that there is no longer something like a linear system which can be predicted in the sense of cause-effect relationship. So what you get then is a self-organizing system where you have patterns emerging, and these patterns are in the end self-stabilizing the system again. And there's the question we have just discussed about, which patterns may be there and which pattern should not be there. So just to be able to have emergent patterns is not enough. So when we would only have this cortex part, where we have high creativity, without a limbic system, we would be steadily in a schizophrenic phase.
So what you're basically saying, that the culture, the value system within a company or nation or tribe, whatever, is the most important thing.
It's comparable to what the limbic system is in the single brain. So to know about this value system and to be sure that this value system is in resonance, so that when we are talking together, we are in a similar space of values, then we have a chance to stabilize something. I think the most dangerous thing in a political system is that different value systems are stabilizing different states of order. Then you get something like a fractal war. This is what terrorism is all about. It can be anywhere in the world because the value system is totally different to the value system of the other countries. This is always absolutely dangerous.
John, what do you think about this?
I would certainly agree that in a more rapidly changing world, the question of what provides stability and continuity is becoming increasingly central. Sources of stability, I think, will become increasingly valuable in a rapidly changing world. And I would echo the concern about establishing or seeking a common set of values that can provide some element of stability. On the other hand, I don't want to go too far down that road, because I think that a lot of the creativity that we have in the world comes from very different value systems and very different ways of looking at the world and what we see as important in the world. In my mind, the core value that we need to ensure a broad acceptance of is just a sense of mutual respect and a willingness to participate in discussion and dialogue and examine each other's values and ways of doing things. But I've always been a believer that friction can be very healthy. There's something that I call productive friction, which in my experience, you don't really get creativity until you get productive friction, where people are coming together and really from very different perspectives, challenging each other quite aggressively, yet within the context of mutual respect. I think that's what makes the friction productive, is if there is a sense that what you have to say is worth listening to, worth trying to understand, worth trying to engage on, versus just dismissing out of hand. So in my mind, that is the core value that will help us to navigate through these changes and hopefully come up with a lot more innovation and creativity as a result.
Well, I think you would certainly agree that empathy is one of the key things we need. Because when there is difference in the system, when there are different value systems, we have to do everything to feel in this system, to be able to not be on a too much surface level. So empathy, I think, is something which I really would recommend to any leader and to any person in a system like this, because we have to find the common resonance points, otherwise it will not work. And this needs the ability to feel what the other one is in his different perspective.
Okay, there was just coming another question in. John, would you like to take the first one of Dominic? If culture develops on the basis of common experiences, could culture also develop in online networks and common experiences there on a global scale?
You know, at one level, I agree. There's an opportunity for more cultural, more of a common culture to emerge on a global scale. On the other hand, again, I guess I come from a perspective that says that diversity is actually very, very healthy, and I'm frankly concerned that we end up with a global culture where everybody has the same values, everybody thinks the same way, and I really would rather see a much more diverse set of environments. I think that while we're more connected on a global scale, we're unequally connected. We're more connected with some than others. That will lead to more cultural differences over time, I think. We have an opportunity to connect with people who share values, who don't necessarily agree, don't necessarily live in near us geographically. So there's more opportunity for subcultures to evolve on a global scale. Again, I guess I'm just a little bit nervous about wanting to see a global culture emerge that goes beyond certain very, very basic values that are helpful to ensure
there's already like a
cooperation.
When we are talking about value system in neurophysiology, it's not ethical value system. It's what the associations disambiguate meaning in language. So the value system, for example, is necessary as a possibility to disambiguate language. When we are talking with each other, and I'm just using the word, I don't know, synergy or whatever, what your understanding of synergy is and what my understanding of synergy is may be very different because we are coming from a different cultural background. And what we need is a lot of understanding to each other to get a feeling what you really mean. And therefore, to come deeper, we have to solve this semantical problem. And I think this is what Dominic refers to. Is it possible in a global network to have discourse enough to really share something like a semantic space? Not a value system in the sense of ethical normative things, but in the sense of understanding each other in the difference. To understand the person, and I'm a psychologist, I know it's something which can take a lot of time. even if you're living together for a longer period, to really understand what the other is meaning, you have to have a lot of discourse and reflection and discussion, and after some time you get a feeling of what the other one is meaning when he is, for example, speaking about solidarity. This is very different. And I know, for example, if we are talking with China, it's extremely difficult to understand what the people in China really mean when they are using words like soft power or democracy. It's so different from what we are doing, and we now have the problem that we have to deal systematically with these differences. Because just to wait until people have learned needs a lot of contact and a lot of time. So we have to think about tools, how to enhance and accelerate this understanding process when we want to use the networks in the right way.
When I listen to you both,
I understand.
Okay. May I just jump in? When I listen to you and of this openness of understanding what the outer people outside of the company might consider, I'd like to draw that to the question of Oliver, because I think there is a huge change we need yet to see, that a lot of the leadership within companies is not necessarily oriented towards the outward. And I mean, we've seen that in very many examples with KitKat. All of a sudden, something's going off track. And I think that's a challenge. And I'd like to ask, linking to Oliver's question, whether we have on the one hand the viral warfare risk, and on the other, which you both, John and Peter, actually see as leadership skills as well, which actually need to emerge in order to draw in or pull or be open from the outside, to notably avoid that.
I think John has given already a good answer.
Well, I guess just you know, from my perspective, specifically to Oliver's question, while at the one hand it can encourage viral warfare, if you will, against big corporations where there are issues of disagreement, the flip side is the social internet helps to enhance the ability of corporations to reach out and connect with other people and mobilize a much broader range of people behind specific corporate strategies. So it's not clear to me that it's all about opposing big corporations. I think big corporations, if they understand the potential and capabilities and can evolve to different kinds of leadership, have enormous opportunity to harness the social internet to enhance their impact in markets around the world. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but I think it's a both positive and negative impact on corporations.
You know, when I'm looking at the companies, I'm quite calm, because I know that no one can survive on the long run in a network world when it's not open, in the sense of looking around, being part of it, being part of the dynamics of the network. If you really reject just saying I'm here and the other things are no longer of interest for me, then you are no longer creative enough to survive in this world. You are no longer able to predict in a way when the things are starting to enhance, when there are these hype effects. So you have to be very close to the system to be not too much surprised what's going on, and you have to be close to the system to start to discuss with the people and to be open enough to have this discourse and not to reject. If you really think that you can steer the system any longer by power, then you're lost. This is no longer possible. When I really learned throughout the last 2 years, 3 years, I predicted this, because you know, when you look at the system, you can say we have a high connectivity system, we have a lot of activity in the system, and we have feedback loops. So this system can any time show you that it's very powerful. And if you don't realize this, you will be in a way just surprised, and you will lose your power before you start it. So in this sense, I'm just waiting. You know, this is a new environmental condition, and the right people will emerge in the system, and I'm sure that leadership style will change in the next years, because you have to suppress the border conditions to keep the old pattern stable. And no one can suppress the border conditions in such a highly connectivity system we have now by the internet. And I think the really powerful people know this already. They don't believe it in the full scale, but they know. They have realized this, and they are totally puzzled by the fact.
So what kind of role does transparency plays in this whole new kind of concept of leadership? You were a couple of minutes before referring to reputation. I could imagine that transparency is also crucial and most critical to these new forms of leadership, aren't they, John?
Transparency becomes more and more critical on many levels. I think obviously any attempt to hide specific activities or specific information is more and more vulnerable to being exposed. I think on the other hand too, there's an element which I see shifting in terms of leaders. The conventional wisdom, certainly when I went to business school, was the essence of leadership was to project strength, to talk about your strengths, and if there were any weaknesses, to keep them very hidden in the background and not to really share those. I think increasingly the role of leadership in this more rapidly changing world involves expressing vulnerability, expressing the areas where you don't have answers, where you're looking for answers, where you need answers. And I think that that motivates people to contribute, to participate. It builds trust, because if you are projecting yourself as somebody who has strength and only strength, no weakness at all, there is no way you're going to trust that person. You know that person is a human being. You know they have weaknesses. If they're not willing to talk about their weaknesses, they're not worthy of trust. And so I think that this is a very different style of leadership that most executives feel extremely uncomfortable with. The PR agencies all exist to project strength, to polish the image in ways that there are no flaws. And I think that's a serious mistake in this world.
So are you predicting PR companies are going away?
I wouldn't be that radical. I do think that those that survive will be very different in terms of their mission. I think there is a skill set in PR which has to do with how do you get your message out to a broader range of people in a more effective way. And that certainly is an important issue, an increasingly important issue in our more connected world. But on the other hand, I think the traditional way PR has performed so far has been around this notion of protecting the individual from any bad publicity and any sense that there are any weaknesses at all. And I think that's going away.
Peter?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. It costs us about 30, 40 years to bring first order cybernetic ideas, steering and regulation, into the mind of the people. And now we, I think, need not so much time, but we need time to bring these ideas of self-organization not only in the rational part, but also in the emotional part. These opening up all these things which are trivial in a self-organizing system are not really in the emotion system of the leading people. They always try to manage. And to manage something is to steer the system between a target and an actual value, and you try to bring the actual value to the target, and if you're good in this, you're a good manager. And this model will no longer work in a world which is so complex and so dynamic. So I think we have to look a bit closer to the psychological situation of the leaders of today, because they are in a really strange situation. The tool set they have is no longer the right tool set for this world. So we are in a situation where we have to let things go which have been our strength. And this is for human beings always very hard, because when you have been successful with something, your brain is rewarding the patterns. So we have to let things go with which we were very successful. And if you look at the leadership situation, the moment you can say, and it was already what the people told in the World Economic Forum this year in January, they all were speaking about complexity. Too much complexity. What is meant by this? They do not understand the patterns any longer. And you have to decide in a situation where you have an information The information you have is not able to give you the basis for your decision any longer. What will you do as a leader in this situation? You have only two chances. The one chance is you can try to find tools to understand the pattern behind. And this is one thing we can do, and as I've understood, for example, Hans Rosling, he is going in this direction, saying, hey, we have to change the mindset of the people so that they are able to understand the patterns by using the data they have. Because we have a lot of data, but we are not analyzing it the right way. And the second possibility we have is to use the power of the network. So we can use the collective intelligence, or we can try to understand the patterns by better analysis. These two steps can reduce complexity. And this is a big question we have in the leadership part. How can we train people to be in a more professional way like entrepreneurs, not managers, but people who understand the pattern when it's emerging very early, because this is what an entrepreneur is doing. He's realizing a social pattern, he is realizing a pattern in society far before it's trivial. And then he can do something which is, in a way, entrepreneurial. It's astonishing in a way, but it's not astonishing when you look at the intuition that people use. But to be only as a person intuitive is no longer enough. So your personal intuition is only a part of it. What we need is something like an upgrading of entrepreneurship to a more strategical level, in the sense of we know how to understand the patterns. This is good on leadership level, and the other thing you can recommend is use the networks wherever you can, make yourself open, make yourself part of it, because collective intelligence may help you in this extreme situation of this information gap. So in my opinion, leaders today with more and more complex systems have more and more problems to really decide on a good basis. And this is, from a psychological point, a very, very hard situation.
Actually, there's Costa brought in a third option. It's just that the old leaders should retire.
Just again.
Okay, there is one more question coming in from Ole to you, John. How do traditional self-images of current leaders fit to Leadership 2.0 necessities coming from future challenges? Do you understand the question clearly? Or
I'm not too sure. You know, I do think, again, there is this question that. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I do think it goes back to this question of what is the image of a leader in the past, to the extent that's self-image. I think that is a potential obstacle to exercising more effective leadership in this new world. This notion of just leaders are measured by the number of followers that they have, for example. If that's the way you're going to, your self-image is, your effectiveness is governed by the number of followers you have, I think that's a very self-destructive view in this changing world. Increasingly, the role of a leader, or the way to measure a leader, is by how many other leaders they have developed and catalyzed. And that's a very different model. It requires letting go in ways that that most leaders of the past would find very threatening. I think the notion of how do you, again, create platforms where these new leaders can develop and be nurtured is more and more of the issue. In the past, we viewed leadership as being about helping people and talent to fit into the organization, to be more integrated into the organization. I think increasingly the leaders of tomorrow are going to be working on how to make the organization fit into the talent and fit into the people. It's, again, a very different mindset, and I think the self-image that leaders have from the past is going to stand in their way in terms of making this transition.
You know, when you
Peter?
do it like this, there's something you have to accept. In a world like you described, the people will not be necessarily stay to one company. They will be far more ready to leave the system than they have done before. And this is something they have to learn, that it's not a human capital they have like capital. This is no longer the right word for this. So what we have is just people sharing ideas, tuning in for a time. So what I have to do is I have to be attractive in the things I'm doing, and not in the sense of a stable identity of something which is totally there for a longer period of time. So I have to accept also in this direction more change. And this will also be very difficult for HR, because they are thinking totally different. When I'm training a person, I want to have the payoff of this invest. And maybe in this new world, the payoff is in a totally different company.
I think that part of the transition in the business context is that in the past, if you ask leaders about talent, they would say their goal is to attract all the talent they can handle and to retain it. If there's any possibility of it leaving, they're going to try to hold on to it. I might have a slightly different perspective than Peter in the sense of, I think that if companies shift their focus, as I believe they will have to creating platforms for talent development, where they develop talent more rapidly than anybody else, it actually might reduce the movement of talent from one company to another. If I'm developing my talent more rapidly in one particular company, why would I ever leave? I'm developing it more rapidly than anywhere else. So I think that it's a question of the focus of leadership and what they're trying to accomplish, and whether if they can deliver on that talent development imperative, which I think is not just a nice to have but increasingly essential. One of the things we have not really focused on so far in the discussion is, at least my belief is, we are moving into a world of intensifying competitive pressure. Not reduction of competitive pressure, more competitive pressure, where the need for us, each of us, to develop our talent much more rapidly on a sustained basis becomes again essential, as opposed to just something that we might want to pursue because we're interested in it. We need it, and so the institutions that provide it, I think, will build a loyalty that will be very effective over time.
But for that, I think,
you know,
may I just add on, or add a question on that? I think for both what you said, it needs very strong characters in the end to allow this form to happen. And I guess the fortress leaders will make sure in that game to actually hold out the others. And you, John, now made the argument that competition in the end will be the driving force. How can we create pull mechanisms, enhancing and actually giving a carrot, inducing why people should change? It's competition on the one hand, but I wish that it's information sharing and the way to move about into leadership 2.0, showing trust and vulnerability, becomes desirable. But you will have these different fronts in a company, and how can you actually move forward?
No, I think it's a very interesting paradox in my mind, is that, again, the traditional leaders, the leaders of the previous generation, when you talk about intensifying competition, their immediate reaction is the military one of batten down the hatches, we need to look inward, we need to establish tighter control because that's the only way we're going to survive the war ahead, versus a very different mindset that says if it's becoming more competitive, we need to be more creative in terms of how we reach out and access talent wherever it is, because we're going to need all the talent we can possibly handle, and we have to develop that talent more rapidly than anyone else. It's a very different mindset, but in the end I think is much more productive in terms of how to deal with intensifying competition than the mindset of looking in and building the walled fortresses to protect yourself.
But you know, when we are really more and more in the network world, then you can be sure that the network is training the people in this mindset. Because you know, any day you're confronted with a situation that you cannot steer. Therefore, there is something like a border condition which is more or less producing what we are talking about. I don't think it's necessary to say to the people you have to, or to try to motivate them to this, because I think that the border conditions will just make it possible for the people, because any person has this curiosity and creativity in itself. So most of the time we have to actively reduce the unstable parts in the people, because they like to do things which are unexpected. And I think most people who are in a very stable situation, after some time they are bored, and if the limiting conditions are not there, they start to do so. And this is what I really think is the added value of the net. It's training the people to give this creativity free again, and to not ask any time for the reward or something. They are just tuning in. They like it. If you look what is happening in the internet, the people invest their creativity and they invest their work without a simple reward, because the system makes you attractive in this situation, and you like to do so because you're a human being. Human beings like to play, and this is what the system is just fostering in a way. Therefore, I think it's most of the time that people suppress this part in the normal institution. If you give it free, it will come out.
There is another question for you, John, from Oliver. I just can't read it fully now because there is this poll in front. Tina, can you just move it,
I'm
please?
writing it. Sorry.
So, John, what will be the incentive and rewards for a leader in a transparent, team-oriented 2.0 world if it's no longer total power and control and the silly amounts of money that come with it?
Well, I think that in part this has to do with at least my belief that the most effective leaders in the future will be leaders who have true passion about their about whatever area they're pursuing, that it's not motivated by money or status. It's motivated by a desire to have more impact and make a difference, if you will, in a meaningful way. So I think at the end of the day, that's the reward that most successful leaders will have in the future, is the notion that they are making a difference, that they are influencing and shaping events in ways that in the past were never possible. I think in a command and control environment, we had largely the illusion of control even within the institution. If you actually look at the behaviors on a day-to-day basis, there's far less control than the CEO would like to believe they have. But even there, it's only within a single company or a single institution. If you're an effective leader in the way we've been talking about, which is helping people to make sense of the world and helping people to make progress and developing other leaders, not followers, but other leaders, you will have far more impact on the world than you were ever able to have in a command and control environment. So I think that's really going to be the motivation and the reward and the satisfaction that leaders will have. They're making a difference.
Peter?
Yeah, I just would agree. It's just being part of a pattern formation process which is bigger than the parts. This is what is for people, they call it flow. If you're part of something which is bigger than you are, this is a big motivation to do it. And this is, I think, what the network enables. You can be in this sense of being in the whole more than the sum of the parts, and to be part of this is a strong motivation for people.
We were discussing actually before we were opening up here this video chat, how many leaders can actually a company hold? Can there be a company only full of leaders? Where are the command and control lines? Do we need any hierarchies anymore? Will they all be gone?
It's again a question.
John?
Yeah, it's I would never say that hierarchy goes away completely. I do think again that the most successful companies in the future will be companies that create environments where leaders can develop and where there's I think the question is alignment among leadership around certain core values, around certain goals within the broader environment. And there will always be some hierarchy in terms of how to accomplish things. But at the end of the day, it's the kind of leadership that you see in the Toyota front line, in the automobile plants, where yes, you still have workers who have to do certain routine tasks. There is some hierarchy there. But in effect, what Toyota has said to everybody on the front line is we need you to be a leader. We need you to identify problems as they emerge and solve those problems creatively. And if you can't solve them by yourself, pull that cord that we have installed next to your station and you will pull out a whole team of people to help solve that problem. That's a form of leadership that is very powerful, and it's the frontline worker of an automobile assembly line. If that can be done there, it can be done in all parts of an organization, and I think will be necessary to deal with increasingly rapidly changing and uncertain environments where instructions defined in advance become less and less helpful.
If you're always talking about decentralization of leadership, opening up borders, the question which comes into my mind is, what will be the core of a company in 20 years? Will it be different from today?
What I think it's no longer this clear identity part. Because if you look, and it's a totally different example, but if you look, for example, at the political parties, they had been relatively stable by having a program and by sharing some basic values. And what is happening in the moment in political system is that it's the attractiveness of the topics the people have, which is more attracting the network than these program parts. So I would think that, for example, something like a corporate brand, which has a real stable core in the sense of a clear identity with clear core values, will be still there. But whether it's attractive to be there or not will be played on a different level. It's far more what is concrete action in this company and not so much this basic part, because the people are ready to leave, they are ready to join, and they will stay when it's steadily attractive to be there. And so I think what we have to do is we have to put up this attractivity of everyday work more, because this identity core is a little bit lower in strength in the next decade.
John, could you add something on this?
Well, I guess from my perspective, over time, the core of any institution, whether it's a company or any other kind of institution, becomes a set of people who are jointly committed to developing their talent in a particular domain and want to work together effectively to drive that talent development. That becomes the core, that common commitment to developing talent and improving performance. And then there's the opportunity for that core to connect out to a much broader network of people and institutions that can help accelerate that talent development. But the core is that conviction and that commitment, and in essence it becomes what's known as a community of practice, where there are deep shared practices and a deep set of trust-based relationships that are driving that performance improvement agenda.
In the chat, John, there also came another follow-up question to the last one. to your Toyota example. So the notion is that workers are becoming full-time, full responsibility leaders, but they can assume temporary leadership roles on an as-needed basis.
Well, I think, again, it's a question of balance in terms of day-to-day work. I think no matter who we're dealing with, from the CEO down to the receptionist or the maintenance worker, all of us are confronting unexpected situations on a daily basis. And how the opportunity is to take initiative, exert leadership in terms of identifying those situations, creatively addressing those situations, creatively pulling in relevant people and resources to solve those situations. And yes, it's not every single minute of the day, but it's on an as-needed basis, and increasingly that need is more and more of the day, as opposed to the old, more stable times when we could spend most of our day just following the instructions that were in the manual that was written 10 years ago.
I think we are pretty close to running out of time. Tina, is this right?
Yes, I think we have 3 more minutes, and I wonder whether we can take this last question to both of you as a final question from yes, Servus. Much like bloggers don't become or fully replace journalists, going to the journalistic side, but bloggers and ordinary citizens can commit acts of journalism. So I think whether you want to add something to that extent, whether actually the participation in this respect, where you see it going, and to the future of journalism, maybe Service would like to add some more points on that, or if you'd like to take up the comment as such.
First thing, which is any time of absolutely positive effect, is when there are more eyes looking for patterns. And I think when you have these people looking around in the net, creating something, realizing something, then it's more easy, if you look at these activities, to really understand what's going on in the society. Therefore, if there's someone only saying it's not as qualitative, I would say, hey, it's just a part of the dynamics, and therefore it's absolutely high value. The people may be directly to the situation, far more direct than maybe someone from the newspaper. So what we have is a more direct and a higher variety of perceiving what's going on in society, and this is an absolutely value, because what we need is we have to understand complex dynamics, and this is a very hard thing to do, and this will be even more complex in the next years. So I think it's necessary to not only do this in a profi way. You have to have many people think about what's going on in society and tell their stories, and therefore it's absolutely positive to have this.
John?
And I would just say it's part of a broader pattern of an increasing integration of what in the past were the professionals with what are known as amateurs. The bloggers versus journalists are one example. In astronomy, one of the interesting developments over the past 10, 20 years is the increasing participation of amateur astronomers in integrating with professional astronomers to drive new insights, again, based on seeing things in the sky that the professional astronomers had missed. There's a whole set of amateurs emerging around what's called the quantified self, who are beginning to use technology to monitor themselves in ways that yield interesting insights that become very helpful to professional medicine or professional biologists. But I think increasingly we're going to see more and more of that broader network of participation that effectively integrates professionals and amateurs.
Well, I thank you all for the discussion. I thank also the bloggers coming in. Yes, thanks a lot for everybody for participating. Most of all to John and Peter, you both, and also Ulrika co-moderating. So, and most of all, I would like to encourage you again to have a look at the magazine. It's really awesome, I think, in its content as well as in its mere appearance. And you can read actually the interviews with Peter and also with John. So I'd like to thank you very much on that note, and thanks, and hopefully that will connect, and you give comments to the We magazine as well, and Twitter about it. Thanks.
There is maybe one thing I would like to add. The entire thing was being recorded, so we can have a look at it still later on. Thank you, John. Thank you, Peter. Thanks, Tina. It was a pleasure.
Thank you
Great.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.